This episode is brought to you by SEATS, the education operations platform trusted by universities, colleges and education providers worldwide. Timetabling in one system, attendance in another, compliance in a spreadsheet. Sound familiar? SEATS brings scheduling, engagement, compliance and campus operations onto one AI-powered platform, built on Microsoft Azure, native to Teams and Power BI, audit ready from day one. And the results? Retention up 20% at leading institutions. That's millions in tuition fee income protected and thousands of students who stayed the course. Want to start a pilot or just talk through your requirements? Go to seats1.com. Seats, one platform, every operation, supporting every student. I'm Susanna Marsden, a higher education consultant who helps to develop and support HE institutions in the UK and beyond. This podcast takes a deep dive into the roles of people who work in this hugely varied higher education sector. Each episode reveals what's involved in a specific role, the career path that led to it, and tips on how to get in and get on in these jobs. My guest in this episode is Nadia Ness, Executive Director of Transformation at the University of Glasgow. Our conversation covers a wide range of topics about prioritising and leading change across the university and the focus that Nadia places on people and partnership to deliver change well. With the earlier part of her career having been in senior roles within the corporate sector, we also reflect upon the similarities and differences between that environment and leading change in higher education. And on the theme of change and transformation, we additionally take a brief detour to talk about Nadia's recent experience of stepping out of the workplace for a period of maternity leave and some of the perspectives on change that she's brought back. Nadia, welcome to Job Shadowing HE. It's great to have you as my guest in this episode. You're Executive Director of Transformation at the University of Glasgow, a post you've held since May 2023. Can you give an overview of the university and the role of you and your team in supporting its transformation work?
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for having me, Susanna. It's great to be on the podcast. Let me start with the University of Glasgow. So the university is actually 575 years young this year. So it's a big celebration. And you might know it's the fourth oldest university in the English-speaking world. We have an iconic building called the Gilbert Scott Building that sits as part of the Glasgow skyline. So really the university is a central part of the city. But if you visit our campus in the West End of Glasgow, and I should say we have multiple campuses in Dumfries, we also have international partnerships as well, you would see a real mix of history and modern state-of-the-art buildings for education and research. And so it feels like a really vibrant place to be. The University of Glasgow prides itself on being a university for the world and using our research to solve the most pressing global challenges, and that's reflected in our World Top 100 rankings. So when you work at the university, it feels like you play a tiny little part in being a custodian of this rich history and global impact. So my team and I lead strategic change at the university, and really what that means is that we partner right across the institution to deliver these cross-organisation programmes. They usually combine a lot of complexity and process and service changes, implementing new technology and quite significant ways of working change, and that's probably the definition of what makes them a transformation programme. In particular, we see it as our role to bring staff and students with diverse and appropriate experience from the corners of the university together to support the delivery of these projects, and ultimately for us to help the university to achieve its strategic ambitions and thrive in an ever-changing world. So in a nutshell, that's what we do.
And before moving into higher education and your role at Glasgow, you held a series of progressively senior roles in the corporate sector, including Global Head of Transformation for Customer Support for Ikea, and before that, senior roles at the telecommunications company 3. What was it that encouraged you to move from that corporate world into the higher education environment?
I've really benefited, I guess, from having like what some people call a squiggly career where you don't have like a set trajectory in mind. And I think being open to different roles in different sectors has taught me a lot, but also I've really benefited from experiences that on paper I might never have thought I would have had if I'd been attached to a particular sector or a job title. I guess through that journey, I learned how important it was for me personally to work at an organisation that had a similar values base to my own and a kind of similar culture to the one that I felt would get the best out of me personally. Probably thought a lot about that round about the start of lockdown when you're suddenly in your own house, you're away from the people that you love working with, and you're thinking about the job and what's next. And that's when I moved to IKEA. And I loved working at IKEA. I was in the global team for 3 years. The culture for me was I probably where I felt most at home. And I sort of thought that I would be hanging up my Allen key kind of at the end of my career. And through both my jobs at 3 and IKEA, I was really lucky to travel all over the world. I learned so much about different cultures, different expectations of change in different countries. I've met some really amazing friends through just having the opportunity to do that. But then the job came up at Glasgow, and there was something for me that felt like a bit of a homecoming where you're using all of the change skills in your toolbox that you've built up along the way, but you're doing it for such an iconic institution in your home city and doing it for civic purpose rather than in a corporate environment where a lot of things are driven by kind of cost and profitability. And then I guess personally, after COVID, I felt ready for a lifestyle change. So not that I don't love traveling, but I actually really like my own bed and seeing my husband and my dog and my family and friends. And so it just felt like this perfect combination of the chance to do something different in a different sector in a really amazing organisation and for me to learn new skills along the way too.
And having worked in those different sectors, to what extent would you say the challenges of leading transformation in the HE environment are the same or different to the corporate world?
So I think lots of things are similar, and actually, it would probably surprise people in some ways how similar it is, regardless of where you're trying to support delivering change. I think you do a job like this because you're interested in and you enjoy working with people. And so, I guess, regardless of the sector, if you're not motivated by what makes people tick, how can you help support people being successful, then you probably wouldn't enjoy working in a transformation team. Some of the things that I think are similar in particular are unpicking historic data or processes or that kind of history of an organisation. Why have we ended up to the point that we're doing some sort of formal intervention now? Why do things need to be different? Changing but being respectful of the culture that has come before, I think stands you in good stead in any organisation or any sector. And balancing capacity for change with critical operational tasks is always a challenge. I've never worked in an organisation that hasn't had to keep the lights on and keep operations running while you're trying to deliver some pretty weighty stuff. But then there are some things that are different. So you have in a university, and maybe at Glasgow in particular, the scale of devolution, the scale of things being different, the scale of things having grown organically rather than consciously being designed. And in a private company, you generally have more blueprinting, more kind of rigid processes that have evolved as the organisation has grown. The pace is different. Things move very quickly sometimes in a corporate organisation for good and for bad. And the expectations are different round about top down or mandated change. So I think in the private sector, people will have differing opinions. There will be differing suggestions about how a project should move forward, should a project happen at all. But generally, at some point, there's an appointed decision maker who says, we're doing it, and everyone gets on board, and objectives and bonus schemes and all of those things line up to making a change possible. Whereas in a university, you really have to persuade people that it's the right thing to do. And that, from a learning perspective, has been so interesting and so different that you really have to talk to lots of different people in a way that is relevant for them. And because of the breadth of activity that happens in a university, a change project can never be one thing to all people. So it's trying to find relevance using language that makes sense to people, and just understanding that you are working with a series of people who are contained in very specialised and different units, as opposed to people that are necessarily brought together by one objective or one common purpose.
And we're going to talk in a few moments about the specific transformation projects taking place at the university. But I'm interested first to hear more about the institutional approach you take to prioritising projects and leading that sort of volume and pace of change, particularly in a higher education environment where the change demands both within and outside an institution can be significant.
Yeah, it's definitely a hot topic at the moment and probably is across my peer group and other institutions as well. I think it's something that we're continually trying to get better at. So I will say I don't think we have a silver bullet because doing that is hard. But some of the things that we are doing at the moment really is to try and get an understanding of the cumulative impact of change and workload across different groups of staff and students. And we're doing that in a variety of ways, like continually enhancing our cross-portfolio change planning, understanding and monitoring capacity, because that's not done in lots of areas of the university, better tracking dependencies of projects or pieces of work that actually sit in different portfolios or are delivered by different teams but have a crossover either because of the staff that will be impacted by them through delivery or as recipients, or just because we all need to use the same systems at the same time, and so really getting an understanding of the cause and effect. We do and are continuing to do and enhance staff and student panels through user research, building change advocacy. Our service design team are currently working on creating personas of different audiences so that whenever we're thinking about change implementation, we have an idea or a snapshot of what that person's world looks like. What I would say about pace as well is I don't find the pace fast in itself, but I think what you find at a university is that the peaks and troughs are completely different. So you quite often have to deliver something right at the start of the academic year in order to get the most value from changing a process. But that's the time when it's the busiest and all of our staff are supporting students and we've got registration and enrolment. So what makes it difficult is that unlike a corporate organisation where you might have some change freeze windows or protected time, but you kind of have a clear goal implementing 12 months of the year. To make a project valuable in higher education, you often have one change window in 12 months and it's all or nothing, and so the stakes feel really high. So yeah, again, just another nuance of working in a university.
And in your role, I mean, to what extent do you have the opportunity to work with and influence members of the university's senior leadership team about prioritisation?
We work very closely, almost on a daily basis, if not daily, with various members of senior management group as sponsors of different programmes or as sounding boards for how we think change will land outside of formal governance forums. One of the things that I always say about this job, especially to my team, is that we're in a very fortunate position where we have that proximity and we also get to work with so many teams across the institution that we get to see the bigger picture and how the organisation fits together and hear key messages are steering firsthand. And that makes a huge difference to the work that we do. I think it probably has to be that way with good senior sponsorship. The purpose of having a transformation or a strategic change team really is to enable or unlock the direction of travel that our senior leaders want to go in. And so for us to do our job well, you have to have that steering, that guidance, that support. But we're lucky to have that in spades.
Your team is currently overseeing 6 areas of transformation. Can you share some more about what those activities are and how things are going?
Yeah, so never a dull day. And at the moment, we've got a real mix of projects that are at different stages. So some are just at that project closure, transitioning into business as usual, and doing kind of that final lessons learned and thanking all the people that have been involved along the way. Some are in that post go live phase where there's kind of ongoing monitoring, refinement now that something's live, and some we're planning for implementation at various stages. There are also projects that are being led by us and they sit within the transformation portfolio, and also some that we've loaned or have kind of matrix lines of staff into other areas of the organisation. And that ranges from projects improving student experience across, I'd mentioned registration and enrolment. That's one of the kind of core processes that we're looking at. Implementing a CRM. We're supporting the university to adapt to policy and compliance requirements at the moment. We're working with lots of different teams and professional services to do service design and also finding continuous opportunities for automation and digitisation. So a real blend of work which keeps it interesting.
And you mentioned there the service areas. Can you say some more about the role of your team, the transformation team, and the role of the service areas, and I guess how you work together? I mean, who's leading what?
I see our role as to bring the change specialisms. So, just for context, my team is split into a couple of different areas. There's business change, and so that's our team of service designers, process designers, business analysts, and we share responsibility with the deployment of automation with our information services team, but really that kind of digitising, automating. So, people that can go in, understand the depths of processes, services, why things are, kind of unpick, re-engineer, look for continuous improvement opportunities as well. And then we have our transformation delivery team. So that's like your change generalists who are all about making sure that that project is on an end-to-end path. They're like the super glue that hold all of the different people in the project together. And they bring expertise through from kind of project generalism, managing escalations, supporting, preparing for governance forums, decision boards, onboarding and supporting subject matter experts, to doing that kind of transition or hypercare period and closing the project down and making sure that it's living and breathing and handed over properly back into the university. We have a small strategic change comms and engagement team. So they are very heavily focused on making sure that people understand why we're doing what we're doing, how they can get involved, what it means for them, making sure that we have engagement events. It's not just telling people through email or through internet updates. And also they really support our change community. And then we also have some specialist roles like matrixed into our team. So finance, insight and analytics, people with specific college experience, our people in organisational development function and project management. So all of those roles come together to provide structure, kind of experience, navigating through that path of ambiguity. I'm so lucky that I have a team that have come from all different sectors, ranging from kind of university lifers who get the history and the culture and the context to people that have come from lots of different sectors and have done some of this work before. So they have the muscle memory of how to implement different things. And also our role is to be that kind of objective voice or critical friend and try to find common ground across lots of different parts of the university. When we work with subject matter experts, which we do in every single project, whether that's from our professional services teams, our academics, whether it's from our student population, especially through our student representative council, they're the ones who know the university best. And so it's their role to bring that knowledge, that expertise, also to bring creative solutions. You know what, well, I either in my school or my college or my program, we did this. Could we scale that up? Or actually, if I was making the decision, I would love to do this. Why can't we do it? And to kind of bring that challenge and ambition, but also a level of realism of if we want to implement this, this is how we have to navigate some of the complexities without our student experience suffering or without, staff feeling disengaged. And that it might seem like a simple path from A to B, but what we in the transformation team don't understand is the 80 steps to get to A and B that aren't always super visible outside of that process. We have normally a business owner and a senior sponsor of every project as well, and so we partner really closely with them. But I guess I would say, although I'm sure our ways of working can always improve, and we do always try and improve them, and sometimes we get it right and sometimes we don't, that generally I would hope that regardless of if you're in the transformation team or if you're a subject matter expert, that you would feel like it was a one team approach and we're all jointly responsible for achieving the project outcomes.
And reflecting there on what you've just said, I mean, it sounds like the expertise is very complementary, the way you've just described it, between your team and the service areas or the academic staff and the students. To what extent does mutual learning happen along the way, and can that affect the project outcome?
Yeah, all the time. I would say we all learn from each other, and one of the attractive things I hope for staff members who come and join us on projects for a fixed period of time is that we include them as much as possible in that kind of wider transformation community, that they get included in skills development so they go back to the role that they were in before, or sometimes they move on to a promoted post or a different role with things in their toolkit that they didn't have before they started. Equally, we learn from them all the time about just the realities of what it takes to deliver a great student experience in increasingly challenging times in higher education. We learn about processes, we learn about relationships with other public sector bodies, we learn about how the university partners with the government, with other civic institutions. So really, for us, we build our view of the university through the voices that we talk to, and you learn about just the impressive breadth and scale and impact of work that happens. And hopefully people learn from us how to deliver change well and how to use things like process mapping or continuous improvement to just go back to their own team and continue to keep some of those concepts alive.
And building on that principle of achieving change through people working in partnership, I know you've established a university change community of over 600 people. How have you gone about achieving that, and what does that engagement look like?
So I will absolutely give credit to our strategic change and comms team who have done that. They have worked really hard on refreshing the offering for our change community. So we've had a change community running since prior to my time at the university, but in the last 12 to 18 months, that offering has been refreshed. So it includes more in-person events. It ties much more closely into people's personal development and learning. So there are kind of exclusive internal courses and development opportunities that if you're part of the change community that you can access. We also have different speakers coming in that people can learn from both internally and externally. And sometimes it's also an opportunity to hear from a senior management group member in a forum that's perhaps less formal than you would normally see them in. We have membership that anyone can join the change community, anyone who's interested, and we have colleagues that work across the university whose primary part of their role or a big part of their role is delivery of change. And so for them, it's more about sharing tools, that personal development, and sharing expertise. And then we have lots of people who are also interested and curious in change, and it's not a core part of their role, but either they want to learn or they just want to be updated with what's going on. There's a Teams channel that people pretty organically share, articles, things they've read, concepts that they've tried. We really try and leave that open to members. Like, there's nothing worse than setting up a community and then we're like the police that are saying you can only share, mandated articles that we've read first. It doesn't work like that. But then Marie Claire and her team make sure that there are events and opportunities for people to come together and learn on specific topics. The last one was a panel discussion that we had. It was very kindly sponsored by the Ferguson Bequest, which is an internal fund that allows staff to have kind of community events and bring us together socially. So we were able to give people like a hot lunch, tea and coffee, and also have a panel discussion on people related change and how you balance all of the outcomes you have to achieve with the keeping people at the heart of those outcomes. So, and I know we have more events lined up for the rest of the calendar year.
moving beyond your professional role, you've recently experienced a different type of transformation, as during 2025 and into the early part of 2026, you took a period of parental leave away from work to spend time with your new daughter. How did you find temporarily stepping away from a demanding senior role and moving into a new phase of your life?
It's funny because I thought that I would be finishing up for maternity leave and be really nervous about, I'm leaving work and it's been such a big part of my identity, and I've worked hard for my career and I love what I do. And then my husband and I had a really difficult time trying to have a baby. And so by the time that day came, combined with knowing that my team had it while I was away, and we had done a really well-phased handover. One of my direct reports, Graham, covered for me while I was off, and I knew everything was in safe hands, but actually my whole team had been so supportive that I just felt excited to go off and be a mum. And I was really surprised at myself for just being so ready to embrace that part of my life. Also knowing that I was coming back to work full time. And so I think I really went into maternity leave with this mindset of, this is 10 months that I didn't think I was maybe going to get. And so once my daughter arrived, you just have to enjoy. I mean, there are bits of maternity leave that are less enjoyable, or you're happier to put to one side, but every day is a bit of a gift. And actually don't spend that time worrying about work, because work will be there and you'll be back before you know it. But this is precious time that you're never going to get back. So I found it surprisingly easy, but completely different to being at work.
And with your background in change management, were there any change management principles that worked for you following the arrival of your daughter?
Maybe less change management principles and more just being humbled by the reality of change, like in your everyday life. And so I think I really tried hard not to like micromanage time and micromanage naps, and a lot of the advice that people gave me was like, don't try and Gantt chart your way through mat leave, because it's not going to happen. And so I think this is more relevant in terms of understanding how a change that I wouldn't think anything of for my daughter suddenly was a big deal. Or, so actually we're going to go in and out the car 3 times because I want to go to 3 different things today, and you're going to come with me. And seeing her tolerance for those things sometimes just get to a limit that I didn't appreciate. And or you forget a bottle, or you forget the nappy bag when you go out, and then the whole day is suddenly knocked off. And just, I guess, being humbled by something seemingly small and inconsequential can knock all of your plans over. And so it's probably made me come back to work with a newfound appreciation for when people are putting their hand up to say, this might seem small, but it's actually going to make a consequential difference to this project. I probably have fresh ears in a way that I didn't have to the same extent before I went on mat leave.
And what approach did you take to keeping in touch with the university, and how did you determine what was right for you?
So I did 9 keeping in touch days, and I've got to say, like, everyone was really respectful of what I wanted to do for keeping in touch. So I think for me personally, I felt like I had to do keeping in touch days because of where some of our projects are, how fast paced they are, and also the time in the academic year that I was coming back. I felt like if I came back fresh in May and I hadn't read a single email and I hadn't spoken to anyone, that it would have been too steep a jump to try and get my head back into. And I knew that I would want to come back to work and feel like I was adding value as quickly as possible. Having said that, I think if I had said I don't want to do any keeping in touch days until the week before, everyone would have been very respectful of that. So at the first 6 months, I only went into work once, and it was to show off Maeve and have a coffee with some people, and then that was it. And I kept in touch with people on WhatsApp, but it was very kind of surface level how things were going. And then between January and March, I did those keeping in touch days. And one of the things that was hard was quickly realizing that I couldn't do everything. Like I couldn't cover every bit of ground that I wanted to. So using those 9 days wisely, and I kept a reserve day just in case something came up, and prioritizing the things for me that helped build my confidence going back to work. But it meant that I didn't get to have all of the coffee catch ups or all of the things that I would ideally have liked to have done. Um, I think it's a very personal choice. And I also had my daughter loves being with her grans and her dad, and so in the sense of leaving her, like I knew she was in safe hands. She wasn't crying when I left the front door. All of that stuff made it easier. And then I enjoyed that last bit of mat leave. Almost it was like I know what I'm coming back to there or thereabouts. In that final 6 weeks, I'm just going to switch off again, and now I can fully embrace just this bit of special time with Maeve before she goes to nursery and I go back to work.
And you returned to work earlier this year. How did your thoughts or planning for that change work through, or has the experience been different to what you thought it might be?
Yeah, it's been different in the sense that you realize that your energy, the peak of your energy through a day is completely different to what it was before. Like I'm someone that used to enjoy coming home from work, thinking about how a meeting had gone, what was I going to say, and if we had an all hands, what was I going to say, and think that through, and how was I going to be impactful, and how was I going to structure the next week so that I was covering everything. And it just the gear shift when you leave work and you come home and immediately you're in mum mode, and I'm like rolling around on the floor, and Maeve wants to like play with every toy, and she's rubbing food into her high chair, and just embracing that because I get so much less time with her now. And so some days it's easier said than done, but being able to compartmentalize, also understanding sometimes how fragile the different bits of your life are that fit together and that juggle. And I never got it in a way that you get it once you are a parent. And I kind of look at all the mums that came before, and I'm just like, and I say mums in particular because you see other people returning from work and you think as a manager about the support that you have or haven't given them, and kind of go, oh, I really wish I'd known what I know now so that I could have better helped you make that transition. I guess I also will caveat that by saying that if you're in a senior leadership role, you probably have much more control over what your return to work looks like, and that's a privilege. So I think coming back to work and the job in itself has just felt surprisingly the same. Like, this whole life-changing thing has happened outside of work, but in work, you still have your adult brain, you still enjoy doing the things that you did before, but then you have this completely different flow of your day that is not comparable to what life was like before I had Maeve.
Coming back fully into the workplace, I mean, you've returned to a new Vice Chancellor and a new strategy, Glasgow 2036, has just been published. What does that leadership and strategy transformation mean for the work of your team?
Sure. Well, we, like many other teams in the university, were involved in the development of the strategy. And I think it's something that my understanding is that Glasgow does this well, where there is a really broad invitation for different teams to contribute to what that final university strategy looks like. So, in advance of the strategy being published, our work has already been aligned to that kind of Glasgow 2036. But what I think it's done is it's really helped crystallise that North Star. And so now that the final strategy has been published, it allows us to articulate the bigger picture and the why, with a kind of renewed sense of purpose when we're working through projects. So having a clearer sense of what will this environment look like post this project, where are we trying to get to, are the stepping stones that we're creating big enough to get us there. And it always feels quite exciting when you're kind of there at the start of a strategy implementation window because there's a lot of energy around it.
One of the key things that's clear from talking with you today, as well as looking at your transformation website, is the focus you place on people and bringing change to life and being really personable with all of those colleagues around you. For example, your website contains various videos from you and from some of your project board members talking about the transformation work and their roles. Now, there's obviously also an important role in governance terms for written reports, but I wonder, in terms of engagement, if too often institutions rely on that written word as opposed to bringing things to life a bit more like you've been doing at Glasgow. What are your reflections on that?
This is where, coming from the private sector, that's your bar. Like, your bar is that of course you're going to do video updates. Of course you're going to have kind of town halls or do UET where you're all physically located in one place. So I think it's so important, but I think it's even more important in an organisation like ours where there are so many moving parts that you can't understand or connect with people from behind the laptop. So I think it's vital. I think you're right. Written reports have their place. Sometimes you just need to see this is what was said and this is the decision. And from a governance and an audit trail perspective, people have short memories. Like, you need to be able to reference back to that. But governance and engagement are two completely different things, and we should treat them like two different things with two different audiences. I don't think you can do too much engaging with people as long as you've got something relevant to say. And sometimes the engagement is, we don't have any new updates, but before you try and fill in the blanks or before the rumour mill starts, we're still meeting you anyway to hear if you've got questions, if you've got stuff you want to say. So I think it's really important that in a culture like the University of Glasgow, it's people's stories that other people connect with, as opposed to, seeing corporate language about a system or corporate language about a process.
The successful implementation of a project that you oversee is obviously one measure of success, but finishing up our conversation today, what other factors are important to you personally to give you a sense of achievement in your leadership role?
That's a good question to finish on. Firstly, I get a personal sense of satisfaction from the problem solving. If you can take a really gnarly project statement, case for change, it feels a bit impossible, it feels a bit audacious, and then a couple of years later you've been patient, there will have been lots of twists and turns, probably sometimes when it did feel impossible, and you get to the point where you've managed to deliver maybe not the thing you set out to deliver, but something that meets the outcomes, or maybe something better. That for me is like such a sense of pride, because that's what makes this job so exciting, is the kind of ambiguity, the unknown, the taking risks, the failing fast, moving on. But then, as I said earlier, I'm really interested in people. I love working with people. And so if you are working on a project, or you get to support a team who are working on a project, and you see that growth in them, you see them stand up and do things at the end of the project that you know they were really terrified to do at the start, or you see them take on more responsibility, you see them overcome some really difficult times, or they pull together, that sense of camaraderie. I feel like then I have done my job in service of them. Like, I've done a good job to serve the people that are in the project teams, and I mean our subject matter experts as much as I mean my own team, but also the end users of the project, of whatever it is that we've delivered. So I guess the thing that gets me out of bed the most is the people aspects of the job, because that's the bit that I enjoy the most, outside of the, have we actually achieved the outcome, or did we meet the business case?
Nadia, it's been really interesting talking to you today. Thank you so much for coming onto the podcast and for sharing your reflections.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me.
The Association of Higher Education Professionals and the British University's Finance Directors Group, BUFDG, are both proud to support Job Shadowing HE as a valuable source of professional insight. The podcast was presented by Susanna Marsden, and you can find out more about her consultancy work at susannamarsden.co.uk. Audio production and music was by me, Rodri Marsden. Find out more about this podcast and hear previous episodes at jobshadowinghe.com.